Siŵr Davio, Tomajori Arab Cuselin Kineric Adro Richard Jenkin.
Good evening everyone and welcome to this important book launch. The publisher, the contributors, writers of essays in the book, sponsors and supporters all. I'd like to say a special word of thanks to Francis Bootle Publishers, who've been such wonderful helpers and supporters over many years for the whole of the Cornish movement, and I'm sure Anne will say more about that a little later on. Richard Jenkin, Mac Dyfrowydd, has been an outstanding figure in the Cornish movement, and his influence is still felt and can be seen in every facet of the movement. He led the Gorsedd into the centre of public life in Cornwall and transformed it to the point where councillors, members of Parliament and other worthies take note when the Grand Bard expresses an opinion or urges a certain course of action. His successors as Grand Bard have followed this proactive course, and Gorsedd representatives are found now on many committees and working groups having real influence. As chairman of Mevion Kerno, he pushed forward projects which now are fully accepted. The flag is seen everywhere, more and more Cornish is being taught in schools. There is a university in Cornwall. There is talk in government circles of a limited devolution package. There is a team of MK councillors in Leedstown. He had good support from his many colleagues, let us never forget that. It was a team effort, but it was he who was the leader who drove everything forward. He secured within the movement a spirit of cooperation and compromise, which has stood us in good stead when we were seeking a way forward through the bewildering arguments about the spelling. Since then, every Grand Bard and many other people have accepted this principle, and the Cornish movement is the stronger for it. There's so much more in the book, so the last thing I want to do is to spoil your pleasure in reading it. On a personal note, it was a great honour to have been asked to speak at Richard's funeral, and this is a continuing honour to have been asked to introduce this evening's proceedings, Muraz. Lemon, if enough you commend your author, Matt Jethan, Derek Williams, Penscrifa and Liver. Now I'd like to introduce to you Matt Jethan, Derek Williams, who is the editor of this book.
That great long letter is summed up rather nicely as this: Chwaith bro un enef, chwaith bro un dan nef, chwaith corff un enef, chwaith ieith un laver, chwaith clever un esger, chwaith bro y geltia. For those of you unfortunate enough not to know any Cornish, translation is 6 lands under heaven, 6 bodies, 1 soul, 6 languages, 1 saying, 6 swords, 1 enemy, 6 lands of Celtia. That just sums it up, and it uses Cornish, and it's got a sword in it. Brilliant.
I'm very honoured to be here today to launch this book about the life and times of Richard Jenkin. In the book, several people have begun their piece by writing about the first time they heard about Richard, and I will begin in the same way, as we all have our tales to tell. When I was about 11 years old, I became very interested in Cornish place names and their meaning. I translated the place names into English, and the landscape gained more relevance for me once the Cornish meaning was discovered. Then when I was 13, I saw a film on the television showing a man and a woman having tea in their garden and talking in Cornish. This was the first time I saw Richard and Anne Jenkin, and the first time I heard the Cornish language spoken. I was hooked and promised myself that when I returned to Kerno after my studies, I would learn Canuic. And I did just that. Then in 1977, I became a bard at Nine Maidens, a stone circle at St Column, and Richard, as Grand Bard, received me into the Gorsedd circle with the name Steren Moor. Map de Roeth began and finished the job. Eventually, like him, I became the Gorseth Marshal, in charge of all the Gorseth ceremonies, and now I follow in his wake as Grand Bard. As one takes a journey through this book with its contributors, one can acknowledge the diversity of the subjects which reflect the man Richard was. A man who was fully involved in the Cornish scene, a passionate patriot. From being a Cornish speaker, a poet, a magazine editor, a guiding light of the Asethbos and the Celtic Congress, twice Grand Bard of Gorseth Kerno, 3 terms in all, to entering the political world as a candidate for Mebion Kerno, one can see that Richard was a multifaceted man, underpinned by an abiding love for Cornwall. At the same time, Richard was a devoted family man and cherished by his family. While reading this book, I began making notes on his views, a veritable shopping list of things he wanted Cornwall to achieve, and his stance on our perennial problems. I then wanted to see how well we've done since the early days. Here it is, in no particular order or priority. He wanted further acceptance of the Celtic character of Cornwall and its right to self-government in domestic affairs. He believed that we are one of the 6 Celtic nations and we need to support each other. We should support the Cornish language and language classes, promote a self-knowledge of Cornish history from the Cornish point of view, especially in schools, promote the Cornish kilt, the use of the Cornish flag, and marches like St. Piran's March in Truro to demonstrate our distinctiveness. One of his main aims was to establish a Cornish university and promote what he called the technical genius of Cornish people. He thought we should expand renewable energy through the construction of tidal barrages. Perhaps the hub of Gwythian will suffice. He believed the need for our MPs to have a firm Cornish background up at Westminster, to speak with Cornish knowledge for Cornish interests. At that time he said, "After all, which of our MPs is a native of Cornwall?" I think we can say we have some now, especially with Andrew George taking part of his oath in the Cornish language. He was also interested in the boundary problems and said, "We cannot allow any part of historic Cornish land to be stolen." This resonates loudly with me, especially coming from Essa, and we repeatedly have to fight this problem. He also spoke out about the imposition of Plymouth and Exeter postcodes, no to PL and EX in Mid and East Cornwall. He wanted Cornwall as a single unit for European parliamentary representation. There is a certain familiarity about this list. I think we have made good progress in some areas, but in others it would be graded by Ofsted as a W, working towards. In 2001, during the MK 50th birthday celebration, Richard's last speech as life president of MK concluded with these words: "If we don't have a Cornish assembly up and running, and a Cornish university, and a prosperous economy in Cornwall, I'll come back and haunt you. Give it everything you've got, and all can be achieved." Some things have been achieved, but there is an awful lot left to do. Richard was always a driving force at the forefront of the Cornish movement, an active campaigner, especially when apathy prevailed. Let us take this opportunity, this reminder from Richard, to redouble our efforts to achieve these goals, or else we can expect to be haunted. Enjoy this miscellany of writings, a veritable crowdy crawl, about a man who embraced the Cornish scene and enhanced it. Kerna Bisviken.
you.